FPA 1, Tape 4, Side A, talking about a very interesting subject of minister and his ethics, his conduct, how he treats his fellow minister, how he treats his fellow minister's congregation, and just in general his behavior with others. Two primary reasons that a preacher loves to receive transfers from another man's church. One of those is money. We can talk about all kind of spiritual reasons. You know, we can justify our behavior by saying that, well, we offer that person more spiritual growth potential. A lot of different reasons we can use, but just to cut away all the fog and smoke around what's going on, there's two reasons, usually. Most usually there's two reasons. Number one is money. A couple who make combined $30,000 a year will pay $3,000 tithes and up to as much as $1,500 in donations to various programs of the church, foreign home missions, Sunday school, youth, building fund, general offerings. So we're talking $4,500 a year over a 10-year period. That couple will contribute $45,000 to that church. And if you can pick up three of those couples, you have gained about $135,000 through your treasury over a 10-year period. That's considerable. The tithing alone of $30,000 for one couple or $90,000 for three couples. Just the growth of three couples and this level of income will add a $90,000 income to the church over a 10-year period. $9,000 a year, that's not bad. Oh, if you could get 10 or 15 couples. Well, it doesn't take long until you can see that money plays a strong consideration. Now, of course, we never state that up front. I know that if you're going to take members from somebody's church, why, you're not going to just say, well, I'm after their money. You're going to say, well, you know, they have more growth opportunity in our church, and they're more comfortable with the people in our congregation. But say what you want to, the love of money is the root of all evil, and money plays the strong consideration in our taking in members from another church. Second of all is pride. And there is a very strong motivation to the pride of life. There's ego that we preachers have, and we must cater to that ego, the trip that we need to travel on occasionally. And so it is if we can pick up a family with 4 children, that's 6 in our Sunday school, and then they have relatives in that church, and so we'll have an inside track to the membership of the neighboring church. And so if they will come into our church, we pick them up. They also are very talented musicians and singers and Sunday school teachers and workers. So we have the potential of growth added to immensely by the moving in of this family, and so we readily receive them. It gives us bragging rights of our growth for the last year. Yes, we've gone from 50 to 56 in just the last few days, and we expect a larger growth because we know that there are more disgruntled people and those that live on the periphery of the church body, and we know that if we can make these people so excited about our church, they're going to tell others, and our motives are wrong, and they're obviously wrong, and we kind of justify our motives by a smoke screen, and we give all kind of reasons and logic. But let's deal with ethics. Let's deal with principle. We have a community with so many unsaved that need God, and the call of the ministry is not only to assimilate a large congregation, but to minister to the needy and the lost. The obligation to minister to the unsaved is the foremost obligation of any preacher in his congregation. And with every added family you get, there is the benefits of added income and boasting rights, but there's an added responsibility of growth. I understand that in the growth pattern of any church that there can't be a 200 change, from growth to 200. At 200, there will need to be a complete overhauling of the structure from the top down of delegated authority and officers and areas of responsibility. And then again, at around 400, it's a total different organizational structure from 200. And so it's going to mandate that the pastor restructure, and people will be shuffled around, and there's going to be awkward situations, and there's property to buy and classes to be added, etc., and on the list goes. So just simply growth is not a solution in itself. I've heard it said, and I think this is an overstatement of the fact, maybe an oversimplification, but the more people you have, the more problems you have. And to a degree that's true, but I wouldn't want to compare every person with a problem. All people are not problems. Now, they all have struggles, but they contribute immensely to the work of God, and there's nothing wrong with having a church that grows 200, 400, 600, 800. The size is not really the basic importance. The foundation of that church is what's really important. If I must lose the relationship, the friendship, the fellowship of all the pastors within the 100-mile radius of my church, for me to experience the growth that I desire to have, then I had rather, if that's the only two choices, I'd rather have far less growth and the good relationship with my fellow minister than to have phenomenal growth and then have lost all the respect of the neighboring ministers, because a bishop must have a good report from without. And even though we know that Jesus was concerned with the ministry that he came to minister, and even at age 12 he was prepared to go into the synagogue and teach, there was a scripture, that says that he continued in favor of both God and man. And we can expect to please people sometimes. And we can fall back on that scripture, when every man speaks well of you, you need to beware. But we're not talking about every man, every ungodly heathen. But there are those in our fellowship, there are those of like precious faith that we should be able to work with hand in hand. When you find yourself in conflict with 2 or 3 of the ministers of like precious faith, it's time that you backed off and looked at yourself critically and examined, what am I doing wrong? What's so offensive about me? What have I done that upsets others? Now, there is a problem in the examination, because there are times when people will be unhappy with you because they have a spirit of jealousy. And if you excel and your church grows by virtue of your strong leadership and your able administration and your effective, powerful preaching and a spirit of compassion that's demonstrated from you and your wife to the congregation, and the congregation falls in love with you and falls in love with God, and they really do excessive visitation, and they're faithful in their prayer, then your church will grow compared to someone who is either, 1, not as able, or 2, not as committed. And so then it's easy for those with less apparent success to become jealous. Jealousy is one of the emotions that causes so many problems among the ministry. Jealousy is a difficult subject to talk about because it's a spirit. And quite often the development of a spirit of jealousy is brought about by real situations. Sometimes it would almost seem from a human or a logical viewpoint that jealousy is justified, because 2 people put out the same amount of effort. One is blessed immensely more than another. But jealousy is wrong. And it has to start with our heart, our motives. If the work of God is our heartbeat, then if our brother is blessed, then we rejoice and we don't become disturbed. If our brother manifests an arrogant or a haughty spirit, we don't let that bother us, because we have a confidence that God will reward us according to our deeds, and he will reward our brother according to his deeds. And many of the times that we see a scenario develop, and based on what we see and what we feel that we know, we come to a judgment that's maybe incorrect. We feel that motives are wrong or different than projected, and we feel like that there's a degree of unfairness. That's not always true, but whether it be or not, we have to keep a right spirit. If God has ordained that He wants me to work in a field that's not as large as the field you labor in, that's God's wisdom and knowledge and His prerogative. And there will be some who will pastor small congregations and will not win national plaques and recognition. But somebody's got to pastor those churches, and perhaps there's too much emphasis put on bigness and what the world would call success. So you have to watch for the pit of jealousy. It's there, and if you're going to be a successful and you're going to be an effective and you're going to be a mover, then you just have to accept the fact that there will be some people who will be jealous of you. And if you will be loving and kind and patient enough to look at all the blessings you've received, maybe you can understand the source of some of that jealousy. And maybe a more giving spirit on your part would alleviate some of that pressure on them. Maybe a little bit of willing sacrifice. Perhaps your income is such that you don't have to make some sacrifice, but how about a willing sacrifice? A giving of some things of yours that would change the opinion of those around you and show them love. Heap love and compassion on them. Jealousy is something that we have to deal with all the days of our ministry, either on the one side or the other. In good relations with our fellow ministers, it's so important to continuously remember that they're all human beings. They weep, they cry, they hurt, they get sick, they're frustrated. None of us attain all of our goals. We're all disappointed on a regular basis. I think that perhaps one of the shocks in my life is the loneliness that preachers endure. We live in a very secluded world. We cannot relate to our congregation the way we ought to. We can't let our hair down and laugh and just be a common person in front of them, lest we would perhaps lose some of the respect. So we need other ministers that we associate with and that we fellowship with, socialize, and that we can just be ourselves and relax and enjoy an evening separate and apart from our ministerial obligations and duties. I was in the Deep South and had a day that my schedule was not full, and I was between two services and just kind of wanted to talk to someone. My wife wasn't there. So there was a friend, acquaintance at least, that pastored in the area, and I got on the phone and called him and just said, if you got a few minutes, maybe we can go and eat lunch together and spend a few minutes together. Much to my surprise, he said, sure, come right on over. Man, I'm so glad you called. I went over and he proceeded to give me a good grand tour of his beautiful building, and he showed me through his office, and he showed me some things that he had acquired recently, and then he showed me some projected improvements to his building. And then finally we got loose and we went and ate, and after eating there was a couple of places that he wanted to stop, a couple of shops, and he, Brother Stanford, what's your opinion of this amplifier? And then we went a couple more places, and then he wanted to show me his city and some of the high points of his city. And finally, after about 4 or 5 hours, we went back to the church, and he apologized for monopolizing my time. And then he made this statement. He said, I so seldom have anyone who bothers to come by to see me. And when he said that, I detected a loneliness. And that's the world we live in. There's 5 billion of us human beings on this little earth. And sometimes our cities will number in the millions of population. But we live in a cocoon. Our car windows are rolled up when we drive. Either we have the heater or the air conditioner on. Our homes are sealed. Many of us do not know the neighbors' names. We don't know anything about them. And we live in a cocoon. We go into a store. There's a clerk that's got this little light that reads the price, and it punches into the cash register, and in just a very few seconds you can run through 30 items on the cash register, and they turn around and say $49.76, and you give it to them, and there's someone behind you that's bumping you with their cart. Hurry up, we've got our items to check out. And we live in that kind of a world, and so we just take some things for granted. That's not true. Our neighbor is lonely. Our neighbor, our fellow minister, has frustrating moments. A telephone call, a letter, a visit, an invitation out for dinner. Some of those things can add immensely to the loneliness. Unpleasant experience that I had was the time that one of my fellow ministers was going through a very personal struggle, a time of trauma in his life. Depression had set in, and he had talked with me, been in my home for about 3 days. We had spent time in prayer in the afternoon and in the evening, and at 2 in the morning and at 5 in the morning, he just knew that he could tap at the door, and I'd be happy to pray with him, and we'd talked with him, and we'd prayed with him, and we'd seen an improvement, and I was encouraged. At the conclusion of his visit in my home and my church, he went on to another place, and within a week's time I got a phone call that this very personal friend of mine, a great man of God, had somehow let fears and depression, frustration, anxiety, uncertainty prevail, and he had committed suicide. That's been a number of years now, but on regular occasion I remember this man, and I will always feel that there was something else I could have done for him. For him. When you are prepared to receive into your church a family that this man has wept over, has taught Bible studies, has prayed long hours, has visited in their home, has tolerated their dishonest commitments that they've promised to be in church, and they've failed again and again, but he's gone back. His wife has gone back. He sacrificed his spare time. He sacrificed time with his children. His church has paid a price, but finally they have prayed through, and now they have started paying tithes, and their children sing in the choir. He is starting to teach a home Bible study. Finally, there is production from this effort. But you're willing to take this person in without considering the heartbeat of your neighboring pastor, then there is a problem with you. I know you can justify their coming. You have so much more to offer these people. I hesitate to let you be around my children because I have 2 sons, and you may only have 3 daughters. And since you have no sons, you could justify the enticing my sons to be unfaithful to me. I'm not interested in being around a person like that. When you will take advantage of one of your neighboring preacher's situations, then I don't want you to ever preach in my pulpit, because my people may also learn to love and respect you. I teach my people respect for the ministry, all the ministry. And when you come here and you stand in my pulpit and you preach, this congregation will respect you. They will hold you in high esteem. And if you cannot be trusted with another, then I don't want to be trusted with you either. Now, let's talk about sheep stealing, proselytizing, the unethical soliciting of another person's members. I know that we realize that there's only 3 of those in the United States. It's just that I happen to be living close to one, and you happen to be living close to one. There's not a lot of them, but let's touch on the subject, because there are, a few, 2 or 3, maybe 4. Now, what do we do with the sheep stealer? Do we hang him at daybreak, or do we shoot him? Or what do we do? No, I'll tell you what we do. We leave him alone, because really what he does, we don't have to answer for anyway. And let's accept the fact. If they can entice someone from your church to go to theirs, then the shame is on this piece of meat that has been placed on the market, and they're willing to be bought for a price. And if those people are willing to be enticed like that, and they have not made a commitment to loyalty and faithfulness, then they're not going to be faithful and loyal in the new setting to the new pastor. And you must, at this time, guard against any wrong spirits on your part. For you can't change that neighbor. You don't have to answer for that neighbor's conduct, but you do have to answer for your behavior and your conduct, your attitude. You cannot let this affect you. You will find yourself becoming suspicious, cynical, critical, sarcastic. You will find yourself bitter. And when you fall into the pit of those evil spirits, they will consume you. They will destroy you physically. They will destroy you emotionally. They will destroy you spiritually. It's not worth it. There are too many unsaved. Maybe you have become a little careless in your soul winning, and there's a little lethargy that's set in. And it's something like this that will provoke you to realize that you once again need to teach a few Bible studies, that you need to have a revival, you need to have an outreach, you need to preach on soul winning and the love of the lost to your congregation. And you can actually turn that thing and make it inspire you, and you can be a bigger person because of it. If one leaves, another will show up. What goes around comes around. And if someone's loyal, unfaithful, don't worry. In fact, pray for them, because when their day comes, they're going to hurt. And you can't rejoice over your brother's hurt and pain. Serve the Lord. He is the rewarder of those that diligently seek Him. He's the paymaster. He's the one that has promised to take care of us. And if you build a congregation of 10,000 on personality and organization, there's no benefit on that. Build on the work of the Lord. Build on the word of the Lord. Put people's confidence in Him, and you'll never, never be sorry. There are a few things that we can do. The brain can be represented by a lot of rows of little dots. Those dots represent memory cells. And when a person goes to learn something, whether it be to drive a car or to play a musical instrument or memorize a poem, anything they go to learn, they have the capability of those memory cells. And you go from one memory cell to the next. You know, in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth was without. And you learn those, and each memory cell stores a certain amount of information. And as you go from memory cell to memory cell, you can retain and bring back those things you want to remember. So you can learn to do things by habit. Shifting the gears in a car is one. You can be talking, driving, and not even aware that you shift gears. Mash the clutch, release the clutch, accelerate the gas, etc. And you just do it subconsciously because you programmed it into your brain. And each time that you do something, as those electrical impulses go from memory cell to memory cell, it leaves a little trail. And the more times you do that, the stronger the trail is, until after a while, those memory cells are actually linked together with a trail that becomes a rut. And your thought pattern will hit the first memory cell. It will automatically go to the second, the third, the fourth, and you'll do it a certain way. That's the reason that addiction is so difficult, not only physical addiction, but emotional addiction. And some folks become addicted to things, and it's emotional as much as their brain you do one thing, you just automatically do another. A person finishes eating, they reach in their pocket, they pull out a pack of cigarettes, they take out a cigarette, they lean back in their chair, they light up that cigarette, they say, and they've programmed it into their brain that that's joy, that's exciting, that's interesting. The truth of the matter is that you can then break those habits. But on the positive side, for we that want to do some things, we can program into our brain how we're going to treat our fellow preacher. Number one, I never give my address to another man's member. I never. Someone comes up, I can be 2,000 miles from home, they can come up and say, I have a friend living in your city. Give me your address and I'll send you the information, so that you can go and visit these people. They're interested. I make it a point, when I go into another man's church, I don't take my business cards with me. I leave them in my room. I leave them in my briefcase. I do not even care. When I look at this person and smile real sweetly, and I say, I didn't bring my address with me. Listen, your pastor has it, and just talk with him when you get all the information together. If I give you my address, now you may lose it before you find the other information anyway. So just see your pastor. He's got all the information. And that way they don't feel like the pastor and I are in some kind of conflict, and that there's a problem, and that they've done something unethical or improper, because basically they haven't. It's just that I had the opportunity to do something unethical. I could have given them my address, been in contact with them, and been very unfair to their pastor. Number two, I never take money from another man's church member. I've had an opportunity to preach in a number of churches, and I'll preach in a church and I'll talk about the immense cost of living in the city of Boston. This Northeast corridor is expensive, and the struggles that we've been through. And somewhere in the course of that message, someone's heart will be touched, and after service they'll come around and they'll have money or a check in their hand, and they'll, with tears in their eyes. I mean, these people are beautiful Christians. They have all the right motives, and they say, I want to give you this. And now it's up to me. It's not up to their pastor to come around and slap their hands and kick me out. It's up to me. The burden of responsibility is mine. How I handle this is all important. I'm dealing with a very delicate situation. These are precious people with right motives, and what they're wanting to do is honorable. At the same time, they have not chosen the correct vehicle. And so I look at them and smile, and I say, well, I'd rather you give it to your pastor, and then he can have a record of it, and he can take care of it. Please do that, and then let him be a part of this, and he would enjoy that. And they look at me and they, it's so innocent. Oh, yeah, I didn't think of that. Yes, I will. I'll do that. And I have even had people go to shake my hand, and there would be money in their hand as soon as I would feel the paper in my hand. I didn't have to stop and say, now, am I Christian? Do I have a conviction? Have I made a commitment? Should I take this money? Maybe I ought to look at the check, see how much it's worth first before I turn it down. No, I have programmed into my mind there are some things that I have chosen that I will do. I do not give my name. I do not take other names and addresses. I do not take money from members of another church. I will not counsel members from another church. There may be problems that I could help with, but I will not counsel. And usually I'm not as wise as I'd like to believe. There are mitigating circumstances. There are situations that pastor has knowledge of that he can counsel and advise far better than I can. He knows everyone involved. And so I just don't counsel people from another congregation. I let a visitor to my church who is a member of a neighboring church, I let them know that they're a visitor. I welcome them as a visitor only. In fact, I have it set up so someone of my church welcomes all of my visitors by name. Therefore, everyone gets the exact same treatment. We don't have them stand and do a 20-minute introduction of these phenomenal soul winners, these super spiritual people that have held my neighbor's church together for him in his weaknesses and deficiencies. Here is the backbone of that church, and these are the greatest people in all the world, and go on and just build them up. And they respond by thinking, this is where I want to go, where someone will appreciate me. And it's up to me to do what's right and to let them know that they're visitors and they're here for this night, and we expect them to be back home faithful. No special attention. I don't take them out to eat after the meal, after the service. I don't invite them to my home, and we just give them a certain amount of attention. Then I do not necessarily follow this with a phone call to the neighboring pastor, because quite often those phone calls are dripping with sarcasm. Hey, someone from your church was at our church tonight. Now I want you to know that I respect you, and I'm going to treat your pastoring of them with the proper etiquette, and et cetera, et cetera. Save all that. Just do it. Then I won't have any problem, and there won't be any cause for suspicion or fear. And so if I will treat your people correct, then you won't have to worry, and I'm not going to call you and rub it in, because all of us have people who become disgruntled from time to time. All of us do. And just because it's your turn now to have a little problem doesn't mean that my turn is not just around the corner. What goes around comes around. This side of the tape is complete. Please turn it over. Thank you.